Today I'll be taking a look at the Nvidia GTX 285. Now, I know what you're thinking. It is a very old card and can't really do much. However, I plan on very aggressively overclocking it to see if it can still hold up. Also, spoiler alert, but I did actually end up killing this card due to the overclocks I was running. So, without further ado, let's see how much life is left in this old beast. The GeForce 200 series was the successor to Nvidia's 9 series, becoming the first cards to ship with the new and improved second generation Tesla architecture. The 285 is one of the best cards in this lineup, and was actually the fastest single GPU graphics card upon its release. However, that didn't last very long, and later that year, AMD released their flagship 5870, which decimated the 285. And then 2 months later, they released the 5970, which destroyed everything. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, and although it was quickly surpassed, the 285 was good when it came out. But what made it good? That's going to depend on which 285 you have, but I bought this card in an untested condition just hoping that it works. So before we get into that, I'm gonna clean it out. The version we have is by EVGA, but is identical to the reference card by Nvidia. Built on the 55nm process, our 285 comes with 240 shading units, 80 texture mapping units, and 32 render output units with a core clock of 648 MHz. It also has 1GB of GDDR3 VRAM clocked at 1242 MHz with a 512-bit memory bus. Guys, this die is absolutely massive. It is huge. Here's a finger for scale, I guess. Surrounding this massive G200 Nvidia die, we also have 16 VRAM chips that total to 1024 megabytes of VRAM, meaning that each of them have 64 megabytes of VRAM on them. The card also has a total board power of 204 watts, which was kind of a lot to have back in the day. Unfortunately, because of the card's age, it only fully supports up to DirectX 10. This means we're not going to be able to run most modern games on it. So even though the card does have a decent amount of power, it's still going to be limited by its feature support. But I was surprised to find that this card actually has driver support for Windows 10. However, I'm not going to be using that operating system, and instead we're going to be using Windows 7 running off this unbranded OEM SSD. It's going to be paired with an i3-4130 and 16 gigabytes of RAM. You just kind of stick it in there, plug in the first cable, plug in the second cable, flip on the dedicated graphics card power supply, turn on the computer, and let's hope it actually works. Luckily, the card actually worked straight out of the box, so I threw it into the system, installed the drivers, restarted it, and started messing around with some overclocks. And this is the most aggressive overclock I was able to get the 285 to run. The program I'm using is Nvidia Inspector because it allows you to set your clock speeds to whatever you want, which can be dangerous sometimes. I was able to get the GPU core stable at 748 MHz, the memory 1542, and the shader at 1556. Here's GPU-Z where you can see all the clock speeds and specifications, so let's see how the card holds up in 2022. Alright guys, I am genuinely impressed with this level of performance. We're currently playing CSGO in 1080p with the lowest settings, and we're pulling about 40, 49, 52 FPS, which is really good considering how old this card is. I've been playing a couple rounds of this, and so far I've had no issues whatsoever with performance. There's no dips in frame rates, no stuttering, screen tearing, or anything. Now, I'm not going to tell you to run out and go buy one of these cards just to play CSGO, because it's not quite the solid 60 that most people are shooting for, and this isn't the type of game you're going to want to run in 720p. But this is only the first game, and it is CSGO, which isn't crazy hard to run, so let's see how it holds up in a few other titles. The next game we're going to be looking at is GTA 5, which is a great game to test older hardware with. This is because the game is well optimized, is graphically impressive, but most importantly supports DirectX 10. Currently, we're in 720p with the lowest settings, and the game's been running very well, with an average frame rate of 32 FPS. I've been driving around for a few minutes now, and I've had no performance issues at all. Right now it is down to 29-30 FPS, but we're driving to like Mach 6, so what do you expect? But I think that just about sums up GTA 5. If you want to play it with the 285 for some reason, maybe you have one of the cards lying around, you definitely can. Anyways, on to the next game. And the next game I've decided to run is Fortnite in 720p with a 25% render scale and all the lowest settings. The game is running, I guess, somewhat playably. What? I don't think the game is supposed to look like this. This is not supposed to be happening right now. Yeah, no. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they didn't design this in the game. Is this even a gun? What am I doing? Guys, what fuck is this game? And that just about sums up Fortnite. You get about 30 FPS with all the lowest possible settings, the game starts tweaking out, and you die to a bot. Next benchmark. And the next game up is Insurgency. This is the older one, not the newer Sandstorm installment that costs more money, but you can't even run that one on this card because it requires DirectX 11. We're currently in 1080p with the lowest settings, and the game is running not as good as I expected. So far, we've got an average frame rate of 18 FPS, and interestingly, we're only using half of our available video memory. I mean, I guess I could lower the resolution a little bit more, but it's gonna make enemies harder to see, kind of like this guy. Well, I got him, so I guess you can play this game on the 285, but that's kind of pushing it. On to the next title. And the next game we're going to be playing is Dishonored 2. This game came out in 2012, a couple of years after the 285, and this is about how I expected it to perform. Initially, I was running it in 720p, but I decided to kick it up to 1080p low, and it's still holding up in a finely respectable resolution. Are the rats eating people? I forgot that was a part of this game. So I ended up falling into the water because I didn't want to do a puzzle, and now I can't get out, so that just about sums up this benchmark. We ended up getting an average frame rate of about 35 to 45 FPS, so as expected, the game ran pretty well. On to the next game. Next up is Borderlands 2, and if you haven't played it, I highly recommend you do. We're currently in 720p with the low settings, and despite releasing 3 years after the 285, it is running very well. Hey, we got him. See guys, you can game on the 285. The frame rate's been fluctuating between the mid 40s and 50s, and with that last explosion, we barely dropped any frames, so stability is not an issue. As expected, it's running well. And that's about it for the gameplay benchmarks. Now I tell you about how the card died.
Guys, I have some bad news. I killed the card. So here's the story. I went to restart it, and I was going to test a few more games on it, but I went to restart it, and now there's no video out. That's not supposed to happen. So, what did we learn today? Don't push your 285 to the limit, don't do an extremely aggressive overclock, and expect it to live for a long time. The card does have a decent amount of life left in it, but this was the final foot in the grave. So, rest in peace, the Nvidia GTX 285. Leave enough in the comments to pay respect.
Moral of the story, don't do what I did. I kinda hoped it would have survived a little longer so I can make toast on it for a video, but I guess I'll have to use a different card for that. In terms of actual performance, the card isn't actually that bad. Its main drawback is its lack of support for DirectX 11 and 12. It wouldn't have likely been able to run those games with any type of respectable frame rate, but it might have been able to compete with integrated graphics. That's not saying much, but if you have one of these lying around, I guess you'd still limp your way through a few modern titles. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider leaving a like or subscribing because it genuinely helps me out. If you want to join the community, there's a link to the official Jane Knight Discord server in the description, alongside a few different donation methods that directly support the channel. If you have any questions or related comments, then leave them below and I'll be sure to respond to it. That's about it. Have a great day. Bye.